everybody. Today I wanted to tell you about all the books that I read in January so far. I don't think I'm going to read another one. So it's Wednesday the 27th, I think. Does anyone else have you completely lost track of time? And I want this video to go up on the 29th because I wanted to talk about books today and my videos go up on a Friday. So normally I tend to wait until the week after the month has finished. But I don't think I'm going to read another book this month because I'm currently reading Bill Bryson's A Guide to the Body for Its Inhabitants. I think it's called something like that. And I don't think I'm going to get through that one in the next few days. I think that's going to be a bit of a big one to get through. So I think this is it, and I wanted to talk about them. I feel bookish today, so that's what I'm doing. If I do read one more this month, I'll just talk about it in my February wrap up. But yeah, I think this is it. So 7 books for me is a lot, and normally I read sort of 4 or 5 books a month, but I think the reason why I've read so much is this month we went into another national lockdown, and I mean, not that there wasn't really anything to do before, but there's even less to do. And I think like in November and December there was the run up to Christmas, there was getting everything organised for that, and you know, my kids were still at school, and so there's kind of the running around for that and everything. Whereas this month the children are at home being homeschooled, and so there's just sort of more downtime, but also I've been trying to avoid scrolling a bit because, you know, sometimes it's unhelpful. And also, I don't know about anyone else, but lots of people I've spoken to seem to be finding this lockdown tougher, and I find that reading is escapism. So to me, it does help when I'm feeling anxious or worried. So I just think all in all, with more time and trying to, you know, not scroll and take care of myself and all that, I have read more than usual. So long may it continue, because I had a lovely time reading these. So I'm going to try and go through them in the order that I read them. Let me know, have you been reading more? Are your reading habits different with the lockdown and everything? I would absolutely love to know. So the first book that I read was this one, I think, The Ice Beneath Her by Camilla Grebe. This was one of the books that I got in my box of stories, and I'll leave my unboxing video below and link it and the stuff. And I've got an affiliate link for them as well if you're interested. All the information about this company is on that unboxing video. So yeah, this was one of those, and I think I've got a couple of others in this lot as well. So The Ice Beneath Her is a Scandi thriller, and I was really in the mood for a thriller after Christmas. I read a lot of middle grade mermaid books basically in December, and I was in the mood for something that was a bit kind of, I don't know, had a bit more of an edge to it and a bit more adult, and just really felt in the mood. So I was really glad that I got this book. So in this book, God, it seems like ages ago I read this. Try and remember what happens. Right, so at the beginning there is a gruesome murder discovered, and it's in this rich guy's house called Jesper, and Jesper's disappeared. The woman who has been murdered, nobody really is entirely sure who she is. She could be a few different people. And we also meet the detectives. The main detective, whose name I forget, his name is something. Peter? Yeah, I think it's Peter. And he's very flawed. He starts to work with a lady who I think is called Han, who did work for the police force before on a very similar murder. And so you have these sort of flawed detectives trying to figure out what happened. At the same time, the narrative is going back in time to a woman who was involved, and, you know, it kind of gradually unravels exactly what happened, what the circumstances were. And I really enjoyed this because it plays with the idea of memory and the sort of your perceptions of of who you are, of what you remember, of what happened. It plays with like reality, and yeah, it also has that kind of Scandi thriller feel to it. It's cold, and it's the characters are very just flawed, and it's just very enjoyable. It's not as grim as The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, but had, you know, similar feels because it's a similar genre. But yeah, it's not as graphic as that. So yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a decent thriller. I did predict the ending about 50 pages before it happened, but that happens and it didn't really spoil it for me or anything. I was just like, well, I think that's what happened. Then it happened. I was like, yeah, I was right. But it didn't make me feel like, oh, obviously, or anything like that. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the writing style. It was what I felt like reading at the time. Bit gritty. Yeah, good. I enjoyed it. Next, I think I read this one, Code Breaking Sisters, Our Secret War by Patricia and Jean Outram. This was one that my brother and his wife bought me for my birthday last year, but because, you know, everything runs late, so we actually met up in the summer, and I've been slowly going through the big stack of books that they bought me because they bought me loads. So this one is very interesting. So it's about Patricia and Jean Outram. It's autobiographical, who are wealthy sisters, and they both really want to get involved in the war effort. There's members of their family who have been involved in the military, and they're very motivated to kind of get stuck in themselves. And so the two sisters both end up getting involved. One of them is a code breaker, and one of them is sort of in a very similar role, basically sort of intercepting messages. And so yeah, they both kind of end up in that war effort of intercepting code and sending codes and coding. Coding and puzzles and all of that. Not the actual Enigma, which I thought it would be. I thought it would be based at Bletchley, but it's not. Which is quite good in a way, because I grew up not that far away from Bletchley, and so it was something that I was aware of growing up. And so finding out about a different part of the war effort was really interesting. They were based all over the place. One of the sisters travelled the world, but part of it was set quite near to me in Kent, not in Hythe. Was it in Hythe? Somewhere around there. And also around Dover. And so some of the places they're talking about I've been to. It was just, you know, that makes it all the more interesting, because then when I see those things, I'm like, oh, that was the thing in the book. And then they, you know, so that was cool. I liked that it was based nearby. What I like about this, it was very matter of fact. It was very kind of, this happened and we decided that, and it wasn't overly sentimental. It wasn't sentimental at all. It was just very, this is what happened and this is what we had to do. And I got a real sense as well of that, although obviously the war was scary and big and all of that, that for these women it was also exciting, and it was also an opportunity, and that they had a lot of amazing experiences that came out of it, and kind of the feeling of wanting to get involved and all that. It was just very, very interesting. And I felt that reading this at the moment also did me a bit of good, because it helped put things into perspective when you think of the disruption that people suffered in the Second World War and in other things as well. It just helped, yeah, just to give myself a bit of perspective when things feel tough. So yeah, really interesting. I enjoyed it very much. Yeah, liked it. Next up, I read An Heir to Murder by Charles Heathcote. Charlie is a fellow author-tuber and booktuber and indie writer, and I'll link his channel below. I have read a couple of his books before, and when he announced this one, I thought it sounded very interesting. So it's set in the same universe as his other books, if you've read his Doris books, but you don't have to have read either. They kind of all stand alone. Even the Doris books, you can read standalone. But those books are sort of comedy. This is a crime book. But as I say, there's just some crossover in characters and settings, that's all. And in this book, Alice Valentine loses her job because basically an elderly lady dies and she's kind of accused of causing it. Her aunt then dies and she inherits her aunt's house. And then a retired detective dies and she kind of becomes implicated in lots of these things. And then in her house there is this guy who's sort of squatting, and he's a hoarder and this kind of very odd character, and he is trying to uncover the mysteries surrounding these things, as well as a past murder, and everything seems to be linked but they can't figure out how. And so Alice and Marmaduke end up as a really odd duo trying to investigate the crime. And it's a nice one because it's still comic, it's still got Charlie's northern humour, it's very wry. A lot of the characters, although they are three-dimensional, they're also slightly caricaturish, but it's fun. A lot of the action happens over a cup of tea and a biscuit, and it just has a very northern feel. It's unusual, and yeah, if you've enjoyed Charlie's other work, if you enjoy his channel, it's absolutely his voice and what you'd expect from his writing, and I really enjoyed it. I've had a lovely month reading books. It felt really good to read an indie book as well, because I haven't read one for a while, so that was really nice to include an indie. I definitely have to read more. So then I read, I believe, Boy Erased by Gerrard Conley. And this is an autobiography of a guy who is the son of a Baptist preacher, I believe, and he is very religious, his family are very religious, and but he also is gay, but he has been brought up to believe that he shouldn't be gay. And then he is effectively outed very much against his will, and his family then decide that he needs to take part in a sort of an anti-gay like conversion therapy. And so the book covers, you know, what happens during that time, how it affects him psychologically, and, you know, the aftermath. And although I felt I learnt a lot from, and although I felt that I learnt from this book, I learnt about something that I don't really know about, and that, yeah, it just gave me an insight to what that could be like for somebody, and an empathy for it. I did really struggle with the writing, which I think then affected sort of the emotional impact of the book for me. The reason being, it goes backwards and forwards a lot in times, and sometimes it's kind of not that clear it's changed, and it feels like you get these sort of gear shifts all the time. So one moment you're at the facility with him going through something and kind of discussing his family or his past, and then suddenly you're back in the past, but it might be something that seems kind of unrelated to an experience that happened, and then you're sort of just before he goes into the institution, and it just chops and changes a lot. And I felt that although I still think it's a really important book, of course it is, but I just struggled to kind of get into it in the way that I would have wanted to get the kind of emotional and empathetic response that I wanted. Well, not, you know, it's not necessarily wanted is the right word, but maybe expected from it. And yeah, so I thought that this would be a real standout one for me, that I would find really kind of powerful, but I just didn't get on with it. So, but still, obviously a very important book, and I'm glad I read it. Then I read The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie. This was one of the books in Laura's Found by the Side of the Road books that she made me read. And The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie by Alan Bradley is a crime book. Interesting for me to read two crime books because I don't actually read a lot of crime. And it's the first in the Flavia De Luce series, I think. Yeah. Is it the first? I'm suddenly worrying that it's not. I'm pretty sure it is the first. And so basically, Flavia is an 11-year-old kind of precocious, very, very intelligent chemistry genius girl. And one day she finds a body in the garden and the person dies as she finds it. And then when she goes back to the house, a dead bird is found on the doorstep with a postage stamp in its mouth, I think. And she, you know, obviously there are detectives involved, but she decides that she's going to figure out this mystery herself. And so using her intelligence and her chemistry skills and her research, she tries to figure out what has gone on, why this person has died, and at the same time you have the detectives doing the same thing. So this book has a really unusual voice. The writing style is just different, and I enjoyed it. But I think there wasn't any subject within the book to kind of grip me into the story. So there's a lot about chemistry. I quite like chemistry, but I'm a biologist, so unless it's biochemistry, I'm not that fussed. And stamp collecting features quite heavily as well. And I just think that there was kind of nothing within the story that for me made me really interested. So it was a good story, and I think if those are things that you find really interesting, you absolutely love those being the centre of a story. But yeah, I didn't find it drew me in, but I did like the writing style. There is a point, sometimes when you get a main character who's sort of a child genius, there does come a point where you're like, yeah, of course you know the answer to that. You know what I mean? So yeah, at times I found Flavia a little bit irritating, but I think that's the point. So yeah, I did enjoy it. It just wasn't, you know, gripping. Universal sign for gripping. Right, next book I read this month was Things My Mother Told Me by Tanya Attapatu. This was in my box of stories book, actually, as was Boy Erased, which I didn't say earlier. So Things My Mother Told Me is about a girl called Anjali. This is sort of a romance, sort of women's literature kind of book. And Anjali is, so her parents are Sri Lankan, and she is, so at the beginning of the book, she breaks up with her boyfriend of 10 years and she is basically grieving. And she decides to kind of discover herself. Basically the whole book is about self-discovery. Now, this was such an interesting one for me because the first half of the book, so I'm not really one for women's literature. Every now and again I will read it and I like it because it's kind of light and entertaining, but it's not something I really seek out very much. And the same for romance. And the first half of the book I felt was a bit kind of her sleeping with lots of guys to kind of get her ex-boyfriend out of her system, and it was a bit kind of predictable, and oh yeah, and then she meets this guy and then of course she's going to go home with him, and I don't know, it just felt a bit, it was kind of enjoyable to read but didn't feel like anything particularly, I don't know, up my street. Then the second half of the book, it then starts to focus much more on family and the fact that her relationship with her mother and her sister has really become strained, and she starts to kind of focus in on that relationship, and that leads her to kind of discover who she is. And it ended up, by the end of the book, as a really sweet, sort of feel-good, really lovely, I started it just being a bit like, yeah, and then finished it going, oh, that was nice, you know? So if you want a book that is light and just quite warm, and I love the fact that it's centred around a Sri Lankan family, because it's not part of the world I really know anything about, so I really enjoyed having that that sort of culture within the book. And yeah, it was just a really nice, warm book that very much the tone of it changed, and yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot more than at the beginning of the book. I was thinking, oh yeah, I don't think this is my thing, and then at the end I really enjoyed that. That was lovely. And the last book I read this month, I finished reading this morning. This is An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth, and I blooming loved this book. I gave this 5 stars. This is a real standout book to me that I've already told my husband he needs to read and he'll love it. And I think my 10-year-old son, because I can't remember anything in this book that was inappropriate. I'm pretty sure. I'll have to have a good think about that, but I think he'll find it really interesting. So, when this book came out, we saw it being advertised everywhere, and I did want to read it, but just didn't get around to it. I really like Chris Hadfield. I was never really one for space. I didn't really see the point, and I'm not a physics kind of girl, and I know some people find space really exciting, and I would just find it either underwhelming or scary. One or the other. So I was never big into it. And then when Chris Hadfield started putting out all the content that he did, and I saw the little videos of, how to wash your hair in space, or how to make a sandwich in space, and I was like, that's really cool. And then when the music video came out, which I will link below, in case you don't know what I'm talking about, of him singing Space Oddity in the space, I was just like, this is awesome. And when I was a teacher, those used to be some of the videos I would draw on if we finished a lesson 5 minutes early and everyone was packed up and I couldn't let them go because the bell hadn't gone, and I'd go, I'll put one of these on. And so those would be one of my go-to interesting little videos to show students. So I was a big Chris Hadfield fan, a while ago, I don't know. So yeah, when this book came out I was interested, and then I came across it in a charity shop and was like, ooh, so picked it up. And it's not entirely what I expected, because it actually is like a guide to life. It's a bit of a self-help book, which I don't think I really realised. I think I was just expecting it to be an autobiography, but it's really interesting because his perspective from doing something so dangerous and so hard, the way that he approaches tasks or life, or like his attitude, is really unusual. And I definitely read parts of it and thought, oh, I could learn a lot from that. I mean, for example, he talks about how you should sweat the small stuff, as in look at the little details. And anyone who knows me well knows that I'm terrible at little details. I skim read things. I don't check things through. It's why I pay a proofreader or an editor. I'm not very good at the detail. I'm far better at the big picture. And about how you need to look at those things. I don't know, there was stuff like that where I thought, yeah, yeah, that's me. Or there's a really nice section in it about trying to be a 0. So he says you shouldn't be a -1 to people. You shouldn't be someone who brings negative into the situation. But if you try to be a +1, if you try and always bring value, as in you're like pushing yourself forward, it actually makes you come across as a bit of a -1. So he said if you always try and be a 0, if you try and just be sort of helpful, and an all-round good egg, and kind of not do things but don't make a big deal out of it and all that, then that's the best way to be. And to have someone who's like an astronaut saying, I'm not that big a deal because this and that, and you're like, oh yeah, actually, maybe you should kind of rein in that I'm so amazing, and just be helpful. I think that's good as well. Basically there's stuff like that, but it's not preachy. It kind of goes through his experiences as an astronaut and explains what he learnt from them and why that works in the context of his work, and how that can be applied to real life. But the other thing was, I actually found this so emotional when he sort of talks about the end of his career, and also some of the things that happened during his career. Again, a bit like I was saying with the Code Breaking Sisters one, it's not that it's written in like a really mawkish way or anything, it's just when the plain information is there in front of you, you don't need it to be written emotionally. It's like, oh wow, it's really powerful stuff. I found this very inspiring, and I really recommend it. It's so interesting and it's really accessible, especially as somebody who really can't do physics or engineering or any of that, just because usually I just switch off. It's explained so well, and so I really highly recommend this. It was very good. I really want to reread it at some point because I liked it. It's even got photos in it somewhere. Here's some photos. Yeah, really good, and I definitely took something from it. And again, a really good book to read at this time that sort of helped with, you know, brain noise basically, because if this guy can do what he did, then, you know, I think I can manage sitting at home and putting up with my kids. So maybe. Yeah, and I also learned there is absolutely no way that I ever want to go to space, and also being the wife of an astronaut is a very admirable thing. So, or a husband, of course, a partner of an astronaut. Yeah, so very good. I did enjoy all of these books, even when I've said marginally critical things. That's just kind of didn't enjoy it as much. These were all 3 stars or above. They're all good, and I recommend, but particularly that Chris Hadfield one, that was really good. So yeah, check out links below, those. Particularly, of course, go and check out Charlie and his lovely channel, and also if you're interested, my box of stories video and all of the information about that. So yeah, like I said in the beginning of the video, do let me know how your reading habits have changed with everything that's going on. What have you been reading lately? What would you recommend? Have you read any of these? I always love it when you tell me things that I should be reading and that I would enjoy. So yeah, let me know in the comments. I hope you're all alright. Hit like and please subscribe for more videos like this one. I'll see you all soon. Take care.